Hey guys, if you're concerned about erections, about having higher testosterone levels, if you're on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, or you're taking clomophene or enclomaphene or HCG or any herbal testosterone boosters, if you're short, or fat, or bald, or hairy, if you want to improve your mood and be happier and have more confidence, if you want to fix prostate problems, if you want six-pack abs, if you want to reduce your risk of cancer, or heart attack or strokes, and this includes prostate cancer, if you're concerned about high blood pressure or high blood sugar levels, or if you just want to even be taller and you're a young guy listening, well, today's video is perfect for you because that's what I'm going to be talking about. Now, I've made a video in the past about clomid or clomophene and enclomaphene and HCG, and people have asked me about today's topic, and that's estrogen and estrogen inhibitors or aromatase inhibitors more specifically. For example, I get questions for guys asking, hey, my testosterone level is in a good place, but I have low libido, or maybe I can't get an erection. I ask them, so what's your estrogen, estradiol levels? And most of the time people say, I don't know. And this can be a problem because maybe it's not your testosterone levels, maybe it's estrogen, or, maybe it's too high or too low. That's the issue. And I've dealt with low estrogen and I've dealt with high estrogen, and both of them ended up causing me erectile problems. One caused me mood problems. One caused me other problems. I'll get more deep into that. And sometimes it's just not a balance of these hormones, not just testosterone, estrogen, but also DHT, dihydrotestosterone levels. Now, earlier I said, if you're short, fat, bald, and hairy, the short and the fat has to do with estrogen being too high, and the bald and the hairy has to do with DHT, dihydrotestosterone, being too high. And ironically, when these two hormones are high, your testosterone is low. So you're getting the worst out of the worst hormonal combinations. And when I was 19, that's my problem. I had normal levels, but I had low testosterone, had a high estrogen, and I had a higher DHT, and everything was fine, looked fine, everything was fine. But I remember telling the doctor, hey, this is not good. I'm 19. This is only good as it's going to get. And he said, don't worry about it. You're young, things are normal. And I remember saying, yeah, but it's not optimal. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. And I said, look, you can make $50,000 a year, or you can make $250,000 a year like a doctor. Which would you prefer? And he laughed. It just blew me off. And ever since then, I got really into hormones because it explained why I wasn't gaining muscle, or, things just weren't good at the gym, and my mood, or sometimes I get emotional and all these things. I'll get deeper into all this stuff about what I did to reduce it, all my side effects, all the problems, all the different things I did, natural, the drugs, and so forth. So I'll get into all that. But today, I just really focus on primarily estrogen and aromatase inhibitors for men, how to manage it, too high, too low, and also dig into the natural ways you can do it, supplements, or just lifestyle changes. So you don't need to go hardcore with the drugs, and you get the best, basically choose what's best for you. So basically, whether you're natural or you're on testosterone replacement therapy, or you're, again, taking clomophene and clomophene or HCG or any of this stuff, today is going to be good. It's important. Also, if you're guys who have had gynecomastia, man boobs, or you're dealing with man boobs, and by the way, I had gynecomastia surgery when I was 19, no drugs, no anything. I just had it during puberty, but some people get it. Mine just never went away. And that's why later on I did my blood test. I'm like, this is horrible. Um, Also, this is super important if you want to prevent prostate problems and hair loss. These are both, ironically, related to estrogen, not necessarily DHT or testosterone levels. Again, all this stuff is going to help improve your mood, your longevity, and optimize all your hormones. So better for your sex drive, your erections, also the size of your testicles and sperm production. All these things are related to estrogen, testosterone, and DHT. All right, so let's dive in quickly into some of the problems related to having high estrogen. A lot of things that guys don't think about. Erectile dysfunction and infertility. Remember, if your estrogen levels are too high, that tells your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your gonads, all this stuff to actually reduce testosterone. This is why a lot of times as men get older, they have higher estrogen compared to their testosterone ratios off. Gynecomastia, which I mentioned earlier, part of that is genetics. And then the other part of it is just having high levels of estrogen, estradiol specifically, also sometimes having high levels of prolactin. Some of you guys drink, some of you guys smoke pot, all these things, that's all related to it. Prolactin and the gynecomastia, and also dopamine. Having weight gain, and the fatter you are, basically the fatter you are, the higher your estrogen levels, because your fat cells actually produce estrogen all on its own, not having to do with your testosterone converting to to estrogen. Muscle loss, obviously lower testosterone levels because of high estrogen, fatigue. And this is like, if you ever think about it, like women tend to sleep a lot more than men. Like any girlfriend I've ever had over the years, she basically like hibernated. She needed like 7, 8, 9 hours. Well, I only needed like 6. So part of that is estrogen related, having low testosterone. Also, this is why men, when they get older, dads and everything, they're like napping throughout the day and they need a lot more sleep because lower testosterone, higher estrogen. Mood disorders, depression, crying too much. When my estrogen levels were high, I would be very emotional. No reason. Now I became a lot more empathetic to women. You end up even like watching Lifetime channel, just things that don't make sense. Like something is off. Prostate problems. Most people think it's testosterone, DHT, actually estrogen. And I realized this a long time ago. Estrogen is very much related to having prostate problems. And that's because estrogen enhances or increases the sensitivity at the receptors to testosterone. All right. It's kind of like if you're super white and then you go in the sun and you're going to get sunburn a lot quicker versus when you're tan and you go out in the sun. So that's what estrogen, it increases the sensitivity to androgens, which means everything becomes a lot more worse. Type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular is all linked to higher estrogen. Body water retention, fluid retention, high blood pressure, blood clots and strokes, and even cancer. Again, both breast and prostate cancer has a lot more to do with estrogen for men than even DHT or testosterone. Also, dementia and cognitive problems is related to having high estrogen, also low estrogen. So I'll get into that a little bit later. So as you can see, a lot of health problems are linked to estrogen. And sadly, the estrogen levels in men is a lot higher now in history than ever before. Ironically, testosterone also seems to be lower now in history than ever before. Higher estrogen, lower testosterone levels. Mm, The problem is obviously a lot of environmental things. People's lifestyle, the foods they eat, the habits, indirectly, all of it affects both your estrogen and DHT levels. I mentioned sleep in my other videos, different drugs. I'll be getting all that stuff in a little bit. So basically, what causes high estrogen levels in men? Again, higher body fat, aging is another problem. As you get older, sometimes your aromatase enzyme, the enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen, creeps up. So that's another problem. Again, higher aromatase activity, stress, chronic stress can cause it. Stress seems to be a problem with a lot of things. Sometimes liver disease, because remember, your liver gets rid of a lot of junk. Ironically, I used to have higher liver enzymes. And when I took different medications to lower my estrogen and my DHT, my liver enzymes actually improved because I guess my liver was just putting a lot of stress into converting. Who knows? That was just an interesting thing that I noticed. Um, Again, there's environmental toxins, xenoestrogen, phytoestrogen from plastics and cosmetics and pesticides and all this junk that we can't do. And of course, if you're eating a lot of food from the outside, the foods you eat, the meats, all that is estrogen. Lifestyle, diets, all that stuff. So anyhow, a lot of problems that are causing it. As you can see, it's not simple. It's not like, oh, it's just because of one thing or these things. And I mentioned these days, a lot of it has to do with what your body or with your lifestyle. And by the way, genetics has a big factor to that. I genetically always have converted more to estrogen. Now, as I'm older in my 50s, I don't, because I've done so many things to improve it that my estrogen levels have actually been low at one point. You drinking alcohol? That's a problem with estrogen, especially beer. You smoke a lot of marijuana. A lot of guys do it. Kratom. All these things will increase estrogen levels. Ironically, smoking cigarettes, tobacco lowers estrogen levels. It acts as a very mild aromatase inhibitors. Tobacco does. Now, I'm not telling you to go smoke or anything, but in the old days, bodybuilders, we would just take a lot of nicotine, nicotine gum, nicotine lozenges. If we didn't back then, we didn't have aromatase inhibitors, which I'll talk about today. And they would take a lot of nicotine throughout the day and that would use it. Also, one reason people who smoke cigarettes tend to lose weight is not just because it reduces the appetite, it also lowers estrogen levels. So you naturally have an easier time losing body fat. All right. So now you're thinking, all right, lower my estrogen levels, right? As low as possible. That's going to be the cure to all this stuff. And I did that when I was really, really young, stupid. I just took estrogen inhibitors, all these things. And then I ended up having a lot of problems. My bones hurt a lot. I remember the first time I took it within a couple of days, I was doing tricep extensions and it hurt. Just in fact, brushing my hair hurt. Everything hurt. And sex drive completely disappeared. Literally, like within the 4 or 5 days, disappeared. I didn't know why, because, estrogen is needed. High or low is bad. Bone loss, osteoporosis is linked to low estrogen. Again, reduced libido, sexual dysfunction, abdominal body composition issues, mood disturbances. If you're low, you also become kind of blah when you have low estrogen versus high estrogen, you become kind of like very emotional. Fatigue, dry skin. That's another thing. I remember my buddy would take estrogen inhibitors and he had dry skin everywhere. His eyes would hurt when he'd wake up in the morning. That's how dry it was. Also, cardiovascular issues when you're low estrogen. Also, impaired healing. Also, dementia. Low estrogen is also linked to problems, as is high estrogen. So, what causes low estrogen? I'll go real quick. Aging can cause it. Again, if you have hypogonadism, if you're not producing testosterone, people have low testosterone also means there isn't enough testosterone to convert to estrogen. Sometimes the estrogen is too high, causing a low testosterone. Sometimes low testosterone also means low estrogen, low DHT, just basically all low hormones. It depends. That's why we got to do a blood test to see where all your levels are. Radiation, chemotherapy, hopefully you're not dealing with that. Rapid weight loss. If you lose weight too quick, body fat drops. That's another reason you have low estrogen. And again, genetic factors. I've dealt with pro bodybuilders sometimes. They can take a ton of testosterone, like 1,000, 2,000 milligrams or more, and they really don't get gynecomastia because they just naturally don't convert. And those guys also happen to get the best results from drugs. Yet the guys who convert the most to estrogen and DHT, the hairy guys, the zit guys, the gynecomastia guys, they don't do well with the steroids because all that converts to junk. So anyhow, that's another topic for another day. Let's get to the good stuff that you want. How do aromatase inhibitors work? Whether it's a drug or an herb, basically the testosterone converts to estrogens through the aromatase enzyme and converts most specifically to estradiol in men. And there's also estrone and estriol in women, but estradiol is the most potent estrogen. So when you do an estrogen test in your blood test, check specifically for estradiol. In a minute, I'll talk about natural ways, herbs to lower your estrogen through aromatase inhibitors. But right now, I want to first talk about the two drugs. You guys have probably heard. One of them is Arimidex. Okay, I'll just call it Arimidex. I know it's called anastrozole, and then I hate those long names. And then the other one is Femara. Femara is another one that's called letrozole. These are the most regular ones, especially the Arimidex. These are called non-steroidal reversible aromatase inhibitors. They block the aromatase enzyme, but then you can reverse them back. So they work real quick on and off. So that's why most of the time doctors will prescribe that, especially the Arimidex. Femara is way stronger than Arimidex. But also keep in mind that Femara is 2.5 milligrams, where Arimidex is 1 milligram. The Femara is mainly used for most likely women who have breast cancer. Bodybuilders will take it when they're trying to get bodybuilding contests, real low body fat. Remember, it'll decimate all your estrogen. You literally have a zero estrogen. Your life's a living crap. You don't feel good, nothing else, but you are shredded. So again, most of the doctors will prescribe Arimidex. If you go to TRT and so forth, it does the job. It's very powerful as is. Now there's another drug, which actually is the one I use. It's called exemestane or aromacin. That's this one right here. And don't ask me why I have all these drugs. So exemestane or aromacin, this is actually a steroidal and irreversible aromatase inhibitor, also called a suicide inhibitor. I'll tell you the cool differences between the two. Now, Arimidex is, remember, and Femara, there are non-steroidal. Aromacin is a steroidal suicide inhibitor. Basically, what suicide inhibitor means that it destroys the aromatase enzyme. All right, it decimates it. That means there's no more aromatase enzyme. So you might think, oh man, back then I thought, great, it gets rid of it permanently. I'll use the aromacin for a while. It gets rid of your aromatase enzyme and you're good to go. But that's not how it works. Eventually, like everything, your body will start producing the aromatase enzyme again. All right. But it takes time. Where Arimidex or Femara, it happens instantly on and off. Aromacin, it happens quickly, but it takes time for your body to build it back up. Just on a last note, like I said, aromacin is a steroidal suicide inhibitor. The structure is actually very much like a steroid, but doesn't act like a steroid. But again, I'll tell you the differences between the two. By the way, they're both equally strong. They both pretty much can decimate estrogen levels down to like 96%. It deletes it. Again, it's all dose dependent. Arimidex is 1 milligram. Femara is 2.5 milligrams. And Aromacin is 25 milligrams. Does not mean it's 25 times stronger than Arimidex. That's just the dose to get the same effect. So don't ever look at these based on numbers, all right? 1 milligram of Aromacin is not the same as 1 milligram of Arimidex. So keep that in mind. All the side effects that you hear about, these drugs is not to do with the drugs. It has to do with having too low of estrogen. And what you'll notice is all these studies is based on women who have breast cancer and they decimate it. So you don't want that. The biggest issue, the differences between Arimidex and Aromacin is the fact that Arimidex and Femara tend to have more lipid problems. That means higher LDL, higher bad cholesterol, quote unquote, and lower HDL, the good cholesterol. Aromacin is not like that. It tends to be better. It's also safer on the liver and so forth and that. But those are mainly the differences between these drugs. I'll tell you how most of the doctors and everyone will prescribe them. Basically, I'll give you the exact dosages for you in a minute, but let's go and talk about natural aromatase inhibitors because most of you do not need a drug. If you're on TRT, I'll talk about that in a moment. But if you just have naturally high estrogen, you definitely don't want to take any of these drugs because they are powerful. Like I told you, even a quarter of a tab of Arimidex, all right, not 1 milligram, 0.25 milligram, like killed me instantly almost, okay? Back in the day, it was just too powerful. These days now I take a quarter, I take a half of an Aromacin, like maybe once a week and keeps my estrogen levels really good level, and keeps my testosterone high. And I take alpha vir and all that. So everything is good. I'll get to that in a minute. So if you are taking drugs like clomid and clomophene, HCG, those will increase testosterone and estrogen a lot more. Some people, if they take a little bit of an aromatase inhibitor, such as Arimidex, it helps them with the side effects of those drugs, or you can take natural ones. One of my favorites is DIM. It's derived from cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli or cabbage, and it basically supports estrogen metabolism and reduces estrogen dominance. And the clinical study says between 100 to 300 milligrams daily of DIM. The alpha viral that I been taking for 25 years. That one contains 200 milligrams. And so it's right in the middle. It's the good dose for that. Another one is calcium D-glucarate, and that promotes excretion of excess estrogen through the enhanced liver detoxification. Remember, liver controls so many things. Unfortunately, the clinical studies are all over the place with the studies, with the dosages, 500 milligrams to 1,500 milligrams, sometimes 3,000 milligrams. So that's been the issue. So you have to play it. It's not as studied as DIM. The other one is called I3C. That one is also found in similar to cruciferous vegetables, and that aids in estrogen metabolism. It's similar to DIM, but not as strong. The daily dose is around 300 to 400 milligrams. However, higher dosages of over 400 milligrams with the I3C doesn't improve or lower estrogen, where DIM does. I mentioned these three. These are the best. I play around with a lot of them. The DIM seemed to work the best, right around 200 to 300 milligrams max. That's the dose I put in the alpha viral product. That's why I loved it. I tried so many different ones. Again, higher the dosages, this and that, higher cost. It didn't make sense. Also, zinc is really good because zinc also helps lower a little bit of estrogen, have a little bit of a DHT, and also increases testosterone a little bit, but it makes a difference. And most guys are lacking in zinc. Also take zinc with copper to balance it out. I used to take a ton of zinc when I was younger, and it accelerated gray hair because it created a copper deficiency. And that's why in alpha viral, it contains both zinc and copper. You don't want a 10 to 1 dosage, 10 milligrams of zinc for 1 milligram of copper. Green tea is also helps, and grapeseed extract. Again, don't take those just for that. But if you're going to add, green tea, why not? It helps. Again, it's not nearly as strong as DIM or calcium D-glucarate or the 1,3-C. So let's go real quick with the dosages for the drugs. Remember, I mentioned the Arimidex, Femara, and Aromacin. First of all, there's no need to ever take uh, Bimara is way too strong. All right. And most of you are not going to be able to get exemestane or romacin. Your doctor's not going to prescribe it. So this is something you need to get on the internet, blah, blah, blah. And with that, again, 25 milligrams is the dose for one pill. The most, again, depending on what you're on, half a tablet a week. They're very hard to cut in quarters. And then Arimidex is probably the go-to when it comes to 1 milligram. Again, you have to see how you go. I have a friend of mine who's on testosterone replacement therapy, and this guy only takes 100 milligrams of testosterone a week, not much. But dude, this guy takes 1 milligram of Arimidex every other day. I'm like, how are you alive, dude? It's like, guy, I feel fine. By the way, he is short, he is fat, he is bald, and he is hairy. So he naturally converts a lot. By the way, when I'm telling about this guy's hairy, it's hairy, and he's gyno and all that. So he needs a lot where I would never take that. I would be dead if I took that. So again, keep that in mind. You have to play around with it. All this stuff matters when you take a blood test, and you have to balance all these things out. So that's the other thing. So again, the dosage just depends on you. Let me just summarize everything for you. Testosterone converts to two hormones, both estrogen through the aromatase enzyme and DHT through 5-alpha reductase enzyme. As you get older, and depending on genetics, your testosterone will convert more to these two hormones. And as these two hormones go up, your testosterone comes down. So that's a bad, and bad. By the way, if you have high estrogen, something I'd mentioned in other videos, and I should have mentioned this earlier. If your estrogen level is high, your body naturally wants to lower high estrogen. There's a hormone in the body that lowers estrogen. It's DHT, dihydrotestosterone. That's a natural aromatase inhibitor. In fact, you give someone DHT, it'll lower their estrogen. Why is this bad? Your estrogen goes up. Your body's like, hey, what's going on? Your testosterone drops. Your body is like, shoot, I need to lower this estrogen. DHT, naturally for some people, 5-alpha reductase enzyme goes up. So now you have high estrogen, high DHT, low testosterone. Bad, and bad, and bad. So remember that. That's why Alpha Viral has a testosterone booster, has the aromatase, DHT, and estrogen lowering, and it lowers prolactin. That's why I made this 25 years ago. I wanted all these things for myself rather than take 5 or 6 different products. So keep that in mind. It's all about balance. And I keep mentioning, it's not about just increasing testosterone. It's not just this. It's not that. Even if you want to get in shape, it's not just about eating well. It's not only about exercise. It's balancing out the exercise and the stress and managing all this stuff. 1 + 1 + 1 does not equal 3, equals like 6 or 7. That's the secret. Even in work, even in relationship, it's a balance of multiple things. Again, always do your blood test. When you do it, check for total and free testosterone levels, also estradiol and DHT. You want to see where these three hormones are working together. It's a trifecta. For a lot of people, it's a balancing of these three hormones. Again, cortisol and all that matter as well. If you're going to start, again, start with the DIM and zinc. That's why it's an Alpha Viral, but start with those. You can go buy it again on Amazon or whatever. Take around 200 milligrams, or you can take zinc about a 10-to-1 ratio. Again, Alpha Viral has all that. If you're on TRT, testosterone replacement, your doctor should be doing it, but sometimes doctors give too much of that. Also, if you want to lower your estrogen levels, if you're on TRT, better to use a little bit every day rather than one big dose once a week. If you're overweight, lose fat. The lower your body fat, the lower your estrogen. So then you don't even have to take all these stuff, all right? My body fat's super low right now, and my estrogen level is easily maintained, where earlier, it wasn't so much. So there you have it. All these links below. If this was helpful, let me know. Questions, let me know. Share it with other guys, all right? A lot of people are confused about this stuff. And I know this was a long video, and I apologize if it was too detailed. If you want a simpler version, let me know below. If you want me to dig in deeper about something, let me know below in the comments. I put everything else in the description area. With that said, have a happy and healthy day.